Welcome to another Dragonlance Saga episode. It is Kirinor Repember the 29th. My name is Adam, and I'm going to give you my spoiler review for Knight of the Black Rose. Now, this is a Ravenloft novel, but it's Lord Soth, so I'm hoping you're going to be okay with that. I warned you guys with the last review, so you should know better anyway, by now anyway. Knight of the Black Rose is actually a really great book by James Lowder. I believe it was released in the early 90s. And honestly, at the time that it came out, Dragonlance was in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss had left TSR at that time. And actually, Tracy Hickman was asked if he wanted to outline or straight up write this novel. And because they were a little bit upset with the way things were going at TSR in their treatment, he just passed on it. However, he was very upset that they took Lord Soth out of Dragonlance and put him into Ravenloft. Even though he created Ravenloft as a setting with his wife, Laura, it still sort of rubbed him the wrong way because Lord Soth was sort of his brainchild and it was specific to Dragonlance. So we'll get into some of that, and there are some serious discrepancies in Lord Soth's history, how he became a Death Knight, what happened in order to get him to that point. Certainly different than the novel that came a number of years later, the one that I reviewed last week called Lord Soth. But I don't really mind the differences, and again, I'll get into all that here in just a second. Now, this is going to be a spoiler review, so if you haven't read this novel and you want to be surprised when you do read it, stop the video, don't watch this no matter what. However, it has been out for a very long time. So if you haven't by now and you do like Lord Soth, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice at this point, if we're being honest. So maybe you should just stick around and watch it and then go and read it. It's good. Anyway, I'd like to take a moment and thank my collaborator patrons, the Heroes of the Lance, and invite you to become one of my patrons. Of course, all the links are in the description below. There's also the YouTube membership that is a part of this channel as well, and you would be a Dragon High Lord in those cases instead of the Heroes of the Lance. And then, of course, you can pick up Dragonlance gaming materials using the affiliate link in the description of this video as well. All of that goes to help support the channel, allows me to pick up some of these source material books that help me create these videos, ultimately. Okay, so all that being said, if your perspective differs from mine, understand that this is just my perspective and it's okay to disagree. Let me know. Put your thoughts in the chat, in the live chat if you're watching live, or put it in the comments after the fact, and I'll get around to commenting on it, and we'll just sort of have a bit of a back and forth and just talk about Dragonlance, because let's be honest, it's a lot of fun. So we're going to get into it. The way these reviews work is I have a pre-written review that I wrote, as I was reading the book. So I'll go through that, and then afterward, we'll just sort of free reign and riff a little bit. So I hope you enjoy it. Now, Lord Soth, Knight of the Black Rose, as it were, this picks up after the assault of Palanthas. It's really interesting hearing Lord Soth's perspective on this event. When he collects Kidiara's corpse in the Tower of High Sorcery in Palanthas, I'd always thought that her soul was part of that, as I believe he mentioned Takhisis promised him her soul. This, however, changes so that his seneschal Caradoc, who is a much more weak and conniving version of the character that was portrayed in the Lord Soth novel, must traverse the abyss looking for Kidiara's soul. The tale of Soth is also different in this book than in the original tale in the Dragonlance Adventure source book, and different than the Lord Soth novel, as I previously mentioned. I don't personally mind inconsistencies, as I see these novels like a retelling and personal approach to the character's legend rather than some factual recounting. Caradoc knows where to go, as Lord Soth told him, and he decides to try and ensure Soth sticks to his word about talking to Chemish, the god of undeath, on Caradoc's behalf about getting his body back, or at least, returning him to life. Now, I really like the way that they portray hell and the abyss in this novel. It is dramatically different than Krynn and the abyss has been told throughout the rest of all Dragonlance novels. Again, it's not a Dragonlance novel, but you can already tell that TSR was leaning in to their planescape idea and trying to stay true to the original core version of the hells, the 9 hells. And I've always been a big fan of Dante's view of hell from the Inferno, again, from the Divine Comedy. And so, again, it's drastically different, but I actually connect with it more. I enjoyed it a little bit more. You see, Caradoc is a ghost in this story, though one that is still able to be physically harmed by Soth. He collects and hides Kitiara's soul from Soth, who is furious, and breaks the ghost's neck. Then, the mist captures them both, transporting them to Barovia. As soon as they arrive, Count Strahn Von Zarovich is aware of Lord Soth's presence and sends his wolves to investigate. He also sends zombies after Soth to test his power. Caradoc flees from Soth and the zombies. When Strahd learns how strong Soth is, Strahd relies on his informants, the Vistani, gypsies that travel Barovia and other duchies. Soth watches one of their camps after chasing the wolves to it, and is summoned by the Elder, a woman of knowledge, who brings Soth into her caravan and begins gathering more information from him for Strahd. Soth ends up killing the Elder and routing the entire camp, but captures Magda, one of the Vistani. Soth demands that Magna takes him to Strahd's castle, Castle Ravenloft. She tries to escape, but ends up failing because Soth can travel through shadow. She ultimately accepts her fate and just sort of goes along with whatever he wants to do. Now, they both travel to his castle and witness a dwarf who is being suggested as being a lycanthrope, getting hung. And as they leave, the dwarf ends up killing everyone, and then when they come back, tells Soth that he should never trust the Vistani, that they are in fact spies. This is when Strahd's coach arrives for Soth and Magda. Now, those two are taken to Castle Ravenloft proper, where they meet Strahn Von Zarovich, who is secretly keeping Caradoc from Lord Soth. Caradoc told Strahd about Soth and is being used to keep Strahd's power over Soth. Strahd eventually tells Soth that Caradoc was killed trying to enter his castle and reveals a magical image showing his supposed destruction. Soth asks why Strahd has summoned him, and Strahd reveals that he needs him for a task dealing with Duke Gundar, a ruler in one of the other duchies. Soth angrily confronts Strahd, telling him that he is second to no one in this land, and they come to short blows that end in a standstill. Strahd shows Soth a tortured man, one of Duke Gundar's duchy citizens, who know the secret to leaving the Netherworld, which is what Lord Soth is trying to find. He is obsessed with getting Kitiara's soul, and since Caradoc is the one that hid his soul, he's really obsessed with getting his hands on Caradoc if he were still alive at this point. This citizen is being tortured for this information, and Strahd ends up leaving Soth to go hide out in his coffin for the day, and Soth is meant to just sort of sit and wait like any good subject would. This does not rub Lord Soth the right way at all. Magna was actually sent to a room in order to stay until called upon. Strahd really wants to kill her, but for having brought Lord Soth to him, but ultimately he thinks that he can use her to some other end. Now, Soth has no intention of being Strahd's errand boy and begins destroying every creature in his path, including the man who supposedly knew the exit from Barovia. Soth has always relied on reaction rather than intellect in everything that he does in this novel. And if you play on his history, it makes sense why. That's just how he was in life, so that's how he is in unlife as well. At the same time, Magda is trying to escape the castle and is attacked by a gargoyle and then ultimately stalked by a red dragon. Lord Soth enters the scene and begins fighting the red dragon, eventually ripping apart and killing it with magic. I got a really strong King Kong sense in this, where the dragon's like latched onto his arm, and Soth eventually just sort of grabs the dragon's mouth, pries it open, like rips his face open. Pretty awesome stuff. if you dig that type of carnal display of violence. Let's see. Lord Soth was ultimately injured in the battle, and Soth and Magna then leave the castle and travel to an inn where another Barovian resident, formerly of Palanthus, on Krynn, resides. This red-robed priest was spirited away with other priests and a mage, but when they tried to leave, a guardian prevented them and nearly killed everyone before they could escape. Now, this escape portal is what they're all looking for. So Magna insists that she knows the location of the exit that the the priest spoke of through the tale of a Vistani hero. She relays the tale to Soth, who finally relents, and they follow the tale's clues. Now, Azrael, the were-badger dwarf from earlier, who was nearly hung outside of Castle Ravenloft, is actually following them, looking to enter Soth's employ to leave Barovia. He kills Strahd's wolf spies as a sign of trust, and eventually discovers the gate out of Barovia from Magda's tale. Soth uses magic to open the gate, and they enter a long corridor that ends in a room filled with skeletal remains. It is obviously old and bare. Then, a creature attacks. The Guardian is a gelatinous blob with tentacles and mouths that hypnotize its prey with visions and ultimately devours them. Unfortunately, it only worked temporarily on Soth, who began attacking it. He sees it's healing after every wound, so when he's grappled and pulled in to be suffocated by the mass, he reaches into it, crushes its brain and heart in his bare hands. As soon as the creature dies, the portal opens, though it is not a portal to another dimension, just this pit to this hellfire. Strahd appears in the chamber and tells them that he knew about this and had begun to try to win Soth over, as he ultimately respects his power after what Soth did to Castle Ravenloft's minions. Soth agrees to talk with Strahd about the portal in Castle Hanadora and travels to a tower with Magda, Azrael, and Strahd. Caradoc is hiding in the tower watching as the two pawns, as Soth refers to Azrael and Magda, are resting, and he and Strahd are talking. Soth agrees to enter Gundaric, which is the duchy of Lord Gundar, after Strahd explains that the torture victim who Soth killed revealed the secret information that Strahd was trying to get from the ghost, where the portal was and how to open it, and that it was actually Gundar or his son's blood needs to be spilled in their own castle in order to open the portal. Strahd explains that if Soth strays into the mists, he could actually become a lord over his own domain and become trapped forever like all of the other duchy's lords, including Strahd. And so he warns them to stay on the path that he outlined to get to the castle. Strahd then summons 13 skeletal warriors, showing his hand to Soth intentionally about knowing Soth's background, and Soth leaves with his pawns and warriors to Gundaric. Once they are there, they rest for the night after destroying reanimated corpses along the road and are attacked by giants. Magnus suspects Azrael is a spy and leaves in the battle, and Soth allows her to leave because he feels that she's earned it, and she'll probably die out there alone anyway. Days later, they arrive at Castle Hanadora and observe it for a while. Lord Soth does not respect the design of the castle's lord. They enter through a grate in the moat and travel to Lord Gundar's son's laboratory. Now, see, his son is an accomplished magic user and a sociopath in a child's body. Everything you want for the perfect maniac character. He taunts and battles Soth and Azrael. Even Lord Gundar appears in the fray until finally Azrael tears out the boy's throat. Now, the Lord disappears and Soth announces that all they want is to take the boy's body up to the center of the castle and spill the blood on the floor in order to open the portal. And honestly, Lord Gundar is kind of terrified of Lord Soth at this point because he couldn't best him, and they killed his maniac son, who he himself was terrified of. And so he just sort of stands back. He's like, do your thing, man. I'm not getting involved. I'm not going to stop you. Do whatever you got to do. So they drag the corpse up there. They let the blood spill out on the floor. It opens the portal, and without even hesitating, Soth jumps through, and Azrael hesitantly jumps in after him. Now they enter this shadow realm, where a tollkeeper awaits, demanding their soul for passage. Neither of them have a soul, as it turned out, and so, in a very strange, quick twist, the tollkeeper was just like, all right, go ahead then. Like, whatever. It's a really strange moment in the novel. You expect there to be some sort of price. If they couldn't get the soul, then something else. But no, they're just like, you don't have a soul? All right, well, you're good then. Go on. All right, cool. And where does the portal lead? Not back to Krynn, but back to Barovia. Now, Lord Soth is furious because he blames Strahd for the whole fiasco. I totally just lost my place in my review. They travel to Castle Ravenloft, where an army stands before them, blocking their path. And they're told to turn away, but Soth attacks and begins to defeat the army with Azrael. This is like a 200-man army. and they go through half of it like a hot knife through butter. Strahd sends Caradoc to parley with Soth under his protection and contacts Lord Gundar. He tells the Lord that they both need to work together to defeat Soth if he'll just do what Strahd says. Caradoc enrages Soth by taunting him, knowing that he's safe from his wrath, and Strahd ends up getting pissed and ultimately decides on a plan to get rid of both Caradoc and Lord Soth, and so he banishes Caradoc from his castle. Now, Strahd had Caradoc recite Soth's history many times, so his plan to redirect Soth's wrath worked flawlessly. Strahd approached Soth, telling him that Caradoc sought sanctuary from him, but has since been expelled and is seeking the portal that Soth recently passed through to Gundarak on his way to the Misty Border. Now, Lord Soth and Azrael give immediate chase. Lord Gundar stayed clear of the chase, and Soth finally caught Caradoc at the precipice of the border. Now, Lord Soth knew that he would be trapped, but revenge burned bright within him, and he destroyed Caradoc and was caught up in the Misty Border. As soon as it cleared, it presented him with an alternate history land where he saved Krynn, but Lord Soth ultimately rejects it. Attacking Isolde and his good twin, he inadvertently kills his own son Peridor, who jumped between him and his twin, and the powers of this netherworld created the domain of Sithicus, a twisted version of Dergard Keep that Soth names Nadrigard. He is tormented by the banshees that eventually change his story nightly, which infuriates him even more. Across Sithicus, there's a Vistani band rumored to be led by Magna herself, and in the midst of the hills, a woman named Kitiara is said to be telling tales of how she doomed Lord Soth. So again, this entire Sithicus domain is just meant to torment Lord Soth and drive him mad. Now again, the history shared in the novel is different from the Lord Soth novel history. The basic idea is the same, but the details are sometimes drastically different. Again, I don't mind. Now, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman didn't like Lord Soth traveling to Ravenloft, but being a fan of horror and revenge films, I think this is a great alternate history to Lord Soth. That's how I see it, an alternative, not canon story, but it's one that I thoroughly enjoy. Now, if you like Dragonlance, if you like Ravenloft, or you like Lord Soth, you should definitely pick up this novel. Lord Soth is wildly overpowered for the campaign world's lords, monsters, and civilians, but the dark powers found a way to contain and torment him, and that is exactly what Lord Soth deserves. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope you guys did too. Jacob, thanks for joining live. Good to see you. You did not know that Ravenloft was made by Weiss and Hickman. It wasn't Weiss and Hickman. It was Tracy and Laura Hickman, husband and wife team. They created it. I also really enjoyed the poster of Sturmfallen. Yeah, it's sad. It's terribly sad. Yeah, so the details that are different, like Caradoc ends up killing Isolde in this story, whereas in the Dragonlance version, it was Lord Soth that killed Isolde. Basically, I'm sorry, not Isolde, his first wife. And the first wife in this story didn't actually have a baby. And in the Dragonlance story, she did have a baby, though the baby was an abomination brought about by a hedge witch. And there's some other inconsistencies too with how he was captured in Palanthas and rescued, and the fact that the Knights of Solamnia in this version actually laid siege to Dergard Keep, whereas in the Dragonlance version they didn't. They just went up. As soon as Soth went inside, they're like, "All right, well, if we see you outside, you're dead," and then they left. Which I'm not sure which one is better, to be quite honest. I love Lord Soth. I really like Ravenloft conceptually, and I played it for years with some friends who were, just goth kids, and they really wanted to play D&D, and I knew how to play D&D, and so we just sort of got together and we played some Ravenloft, and it was fun. I think the system, I think Ravenloft leaves much to be desired because the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons game mechanics are so intense that they actually, in my opinion, strip away story for the sake of mechanics. And when you're talking about horror, it's all atmosphere. It's all story. And so, you know, it becomes less terrifying because ultimately you see your characters as heroes. And why would heroes be scared of a zombie? But if you're putting yourself in the head of a character, then you should be able to lose yourself in it and understand, well, it's a zombie. They should be terrified if they've never met one before. So, you know, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief. There's a lot of, you know, really diving into the character motivations and stuff if you're going to play Ravenloft. And ultimately, there was one specific module that was written in Sithicus in 2nd edition for Lord Soth. Interestingly enough about Lord Soth, I don't know if you guys know this, I think it was World of Krynn, after the original Dragonlance modules were released and the story ended, they released 2 additional modules, which were collections of adventures. The first one was Mists of Krynn, and the second one was World of Krynn. And I think it was World of Krynn where you go into Dareguard Keep and you actually kill Lord Soth. Like, he dies in that module. And so ultimately, TSR and the story group reneged on that death and sort of used that as, you know, whatever. And then they focused on the story of bringing Soth back, of course, here for Ravenloft. But then with War of Souls, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman brought back Soth for that and gave him an ending. We'll get to that, or whether you like it or not, when I review that novel after I'm done with these Lord Soth ones. There's only one more specific Lord Soth novel that I'm going to be reading, and that's Spectre of the Black Rose. However, I am going to be reading this, Tales of Ravenloft. Now, this has one story focused in Sithicus, and that's why I'm going to read it and present it to you. But also, it's Halloween. So if I'm going to read one story in an anthology of Ravenloft, I might as well read all the stories and just give you a review of all of them. And I'll have timestamps for people to skip to the Soth review if that's all they want to listen to. But I will review the whole book, ultimately. And then my plan is to do Spectre of the Black Rose, which concludes Soth's time in Ravenloft and returns him to Krynn. And then I'll get back on with the Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman with the War of the Souls trilogy, and then ultimately Dark Disciple trilogy, and then wherever the hell I want to go after that. Probably back to some more Raceland stuff, to be honest. You have to say you really like the good version of Soth. You love how the evil realm gave him the chance to be this point of good, but he stayed true to his character until the end. And that's the other part of this, is because he wasn't like traditional good. You know what I mean? Like, he was definitely self-motivated. Like, he did what was in his own self-interest. And so he clearly saw that as good. He didn't treat people as horribly as I would have expected him to treat them. Like with Magda, he immediately gained respect for her, and they added that to the story, so it made sense. But he saw a little bit of Kitiara in her, and that's why he was so friendly to Magda. And Azrael, he didn't give a damn about him, but he had his uses, and so he'd sort of drag him along with him and just made sure that he was protected, and, you know, because he was a good pawn as he saw him. Yeah, I'm not sure I would describe him as good. He's an anti-hero for sure in this version, you know, because ultimately the ultimate bad guy is Strahd. But then, you know, I want to sort of turn the perspective on this really quick, because if you're Strahd Von Zarovich and you have your own domain, you kind of think you're the tough kid on the block, and then out of nowhere, Lord Soth comes and walks down your street. I mean, you're no longer the big man on the street. You're second to this new guy. So I don't know who was bad and who was good in this, because ultimately Soth was just swinging. All right, I'm not gonna say that because I'm trying to keep this age appropriate to like PG-13. He just came in knocking anyone out that he wanted to knock out, regardless of the consequences. You know, he didn't care at all. And Strahd was just like, what am I supposed to do with this guy? You know, like he's like prying into Caradoc to try to get some sort of information that can help him sort of, if not defeat Soth, then to send him to his own death by creating, you know, a new domain for himself, which ultimately is what he did. He ended up tricking him. So I thought that was really kind of cool. I see him more as like a Tony Soprano character in this story. You know, he just came in and he was like, I don't care. I want to get home. That's all I want to do. I want to get back home. And if I have to kill everyone in my way, so be it. And he kills most everyone in his way. It was pretty cool. I really like how he was still wildly obsessed with Kitiara. I did not like the idea that Kitiara's soul was detached from her body. I really thought that was clearly put out in Legends. You know, I thought it was clear that he had her soul. Like, that was it. I didn't like that Caradoc turned from a skeletal warrior to a ghost, and this tough knight that did his bidding to sort of whiny, snivelly little leaf. You know, he's like a leaf or whatever. You know, so there's some story changes that I wasn't appreciative of, but let's be honest, this came out well before the Lord Soth novel came out. And so as far as time goes, this is the story and was the story of Soth for years as people accepted it and understood it. And it wasn't until the Lord Soth novel came that everyone was like, wait, what, who? You know, even though I personally liked that tale better. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Jacob, I really appreciate you. Thanks for tuning live in the chat there. If you guys want to hear any more of these reviews or specific reviews of specific books, put them in the chat, put them in the comments below, and I'll put it on my list. I've got a lot of stuff I want to get through, but this only took a week, and you know, it's not like I read a ton every day, so it just doesn't take that long to get through these books. This one's not going to take very long either. I'll probably have this early next week if things go as planned, and then we can dive into the other really good Lord Soth conclusion in Ravenloft. But that is sort of like the trilogy of Lord Soth that I like to think of. It's Lord Soth, Knight of the Black Rose, Spectre of the Black Rose, and we get the whole span of this wonderful villain that terrifies everyone, even Kender a little bit. Like Tasseloff, you know, he was recognizing that weird stomach feeling of being scared, but he didn't really want to call it that when he was around him. I don't know. Lord Soth is awesome. I dig him a lot. Hey, Seth, how you doing? Thanks for joining live, man. I agree. I think it's a great story. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening to my review of Knight of the Black Rose by James Lowder. Have you read the novel? What did you think of Lord Soth and Ravenloft? What did you think about the changes in his backstory? Do you enjoy these reviews I'm putting out? Oh yeah, and the camera thing. I know some of you said you'd rather see artwork instead of my face, but my patrons said they wanted to see my face, or that it would probably be best for me just to show my face on these rather than showing artwork. And so ultimately I'm going to, you know, do what the patrons say because they're awesome. All right. Anyway, that's it. You can always email me at info@dragonlance-saga.com or comment below if you have any questions or comments. I'd like to once again invite you to consider becoming a patron or a member of this channel by visiting the links below, and you can also pick up Dragonlance gaming materials. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga, and I hope you'll join me in the celebration. My name is Adam, and until next time, Slàinte mhath.